A single dad gave his breakfast to a poor black woman weeks later. Her lawyers changed his life. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon when Caleb Rivers was standing in his kitchen wearing faded sweatpants and a shirt with paint stains he'd stopped trying to wash out months ago. His daughter, Isla, sat at their scratched-up table, coloring a picture of a house with a big yard, the kind they'd never been able to afford. The kind Caleb had stopped dreaming about after the divorce took everything except his little girl. When he opened the door, two lawyers stood there in tailored suits that probably cost more than his monthly rent. They looked out of place against the chipped paint of his doorframe and the tired apartment complex behind them. "Mr. Rivers?" the woman asked, her voice crisp and professional. Caleb's stomach dropped. Lawyers at your door were never good news. His mind raced through possibilities. Was it Victoria trying to take Isla away again? Had someone sued him over something at the construction site? Was his landlord evicting him early? Yes. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "We represent Miss Talia Harper." The name floated in the air between them, familiar but distant, like a song you'd heard once and couldn't quite place. Before Caleb could ask who that was, the male lawyer extended a thick manila envelope toward him. "She asked us to deliver this, personally." Caleb took it with hands that had built walls and poured concrete but now trembled like leaves. Inside were legal documents, a deed with his name on it, and a handwritten letter on expensive paper that smelled faintly of lavender. His knees buckled. He gripped the doorframe to stay upright. 3 weeks ago, Caleb had given away his breakfast to a stranger at a bus stop, a $5 sandwich and a cup of coffee he'd bought with coins scraped from his truck's cup holder. He'd been hungry that morning, starving actually, but the woman sitting in the rain with her crying baby had looked hungrier. He never imagined that moment would lead to this. He never imagined that stranger would change everything. Before we dive deeper into how one breakfast transformed two lives forever, I want drop a comment and tell me where you're from and what time it is. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the stories we share here aren't just about entertainment. They're about the moments that remind us we're all human, we're all struggling, and sometimes we're all just one act of kindness away from everything changing. Now, let me take you back to where this really started. Not to the lawyers or the envelope, but to the morning 3 weeks earlier, when Caleb Rivers woke up to an alarm that felt like a punishment. The phone screamed from the nightstand, dragging Caleb out of a sleep that had barely qualified as rest. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. His lower back throbbed from yesterday's shift, hauling cinder blocks. His hands were stiff, knuckles swollen from gripping tools for 10 hours straight. He slapped the alarm off and lay there for exactly 30 seconds, staring at the ceiling where a water stain had been growing for 2 months. The landlord kept promising to fix it. Caleb had stopped asking. The bills were spread across the kitchen table where he'd left them last night, red letters shouting at him. Past due, final notice, disconnect warning. He'd counted and recounted his bank account balance until the numbers blurred. Rent was due in 5 days. He was $340 short. $340 might as well have been $3 million. He dragged himself out of bed, his feet hitting the cold floor. November had arrived early this year, and the heat in the apartment was finicky at best. He couldn't afford to call anyone to fix it, so he and Isla had been sleeping with extra blankets and pretending it was an adventure. She was still asleep in her room, curled under her comforter decorated with stars and moons. 6 years old and already more resilient than most adults he knew. She'd adapted to the divorce, to the smaller apartment, to the way Daddy sometimes looked tired and far away. She never complained when they ate spaghetti 4 nights in a row, or when her sneakers got tight and he asked her to wait just 1 more month for new ones. Caleb stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. She looked peaceful, safe. That's all that mattered. He moved to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, the one appliance that never failed him. While it gurgled and hissed, he pulled out bread and peanut butter for Isla's lunch. There was a bruised apple in the fridge and a juice box he'd saved from the discounted pack at the grocery store. He packed it all carefully into her lunchbox, the one with the cartoon characters that were already peeling off. On the counter sat a framed photo he couldn't bring himself to throw away. Him and Victoria on their wedding day, both of them young and stupid enough to believe love conquered all. Turned out love couldn't conquer debt, or long hours, or the slow realization that the man she'd married wasn't going to become the man she wanted. She'd left 2 years ago, taking the savings account, the decent car, and most of his confidence. The only thing she hadn't fought for was full custody, and for that, for Ayla, Caleb would endure anything. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and checked his phone. A text from his foreman. Heavy lift today. Need you sharp. Sharp. Right. He'd give them everything he had, same as always, even if everything wasn't much these days. By 5:30, Ayla's alarm went off. He heard her small feet padding down the hallway, and then she appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair sticking up in every direction, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, baby girl," Caleb said, forcing brightness into his voice. "Morning, Daddy." She climbed into her chair at the table. "What's for breakfast?" He'd already poured her a bowl of cereal, the generic kind that turned the milk a weird color but cost half as much as the name brand. He set it in front of her with a smile. "Your favorite." She looked at it, then at him. "You're not eating?" "Already ate," he lied. "I was up early." Ayla tilted her head the way kids do when they're deciding whether to believe you. She was too smart for her age. Finally, she nodded and picked up her spoon. While she ate, Caleb made her lunch and listened to her chatter about school. There was a field trip coming up. Cost $20. She didn't ask directly, but he could hear the hope in her voice when she mentioned it. "We'll see, sweetheart," he said, which was code for "I'll figure it out somehow." After breakfast, he helped her get dressed, braided her hair the way YouTube had taught him after the divorce, and grabbed both their jackets. The truck was older than his marriage, but it started on the 3rd try, which Caleb counted as a victory. The drive to Ayla's school took 15 minutes through streets that were starting to wake up. Other parents were dropping off their kids, climbing out of SUVs and sedans that weren't held together by prayer and duct tape. Caleb pulled up to the curb, and Ayla unbuckled her seatbelt. "Love you, Daddy," she said, leaning over to kiss his cheek. "Love you more, baby girl." He squeezed her hand. "Have a great day." She hopped out, backpack bouncing, and joined the stream of children heading toward the entrance. Another parent, a woman in yoga pants and a pristine jacket, waved at someone across the lot. Her SUV had a bumper sticker about her honor student. Her life looked easy from the outside. Caleb wondered if it actually was. He waited until Ayla disappeared through the doors, then pulled away from the curb. His stomach growled. He'd skipped dinner last night to make sure there was enough food for Ayla's breakfast and lunch today. That was fine. He'd grab something cheap before work. The cafe was a small place tucked between a laundromat and a check-cashing store. Caleb had been going there for months because they had a deal coffee and a breakfast sandwich for $4.50. It wasn't much, but it was fuel. He pulled into the gravel lot and counted the change in his cup holder. $4.73. Enough. Inside, the cafe smelled like grease and hope. A man behind the counter nodded at him. "Usual?" "Yeah, thanks." Caleb paid with exact change and waited while the man assembled the sandwich, egg, cheese, and a sad piece of sausage on a toasted roll. The coffee was weak, but it was hot. He took both to go, pushing back out into the cold morning. The construction site was 20 minutes away. He should have gotten in the truck and driven straight there, should have eaten in the parking lot like he always did, but something made him pause. Across the street, near the bus stop, a woman sat on the bench. She was soaked. The rain from earlier that morning had stopped, but she looked like she'd been sitting there through all of it. Her clothes clung to her thin frame. A toddler sat on her lap, maybe 2 years old, crying that exhausted cry that comes after a kid has been crying for too long. The woman held him close, rocking slightly, whispering things Caleb couldn't hear. Her face was turned down, shoulders hunched. She looked like she was trying to disappear. Caleb stood there, his sandwich warm in his hand, coffee steam rising into the cold air, his stomach twisted with hunger. He needed this food. He had a 10-hour shift ahead, heavy lifting, no breaks except the 30-minute lunch he'd packed yesterday and forgotten in the fridge at home. But the woman's hands were shaking. The toddler reached toward nothing, his little face red and swollen. Caleb thought about Ayla, about what it would feel like to watch her cry and not be able to fix it, about sitting in the rain because you had nowhere else to go. He looked down at his breakfast. $5, maybe less. It wouldn't change the world, but it might change her morning. Before he could talk himself out of it, Caleb crossed the street. The woman didn't notice him until he was standing right in front of her. When she looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted beyond measure. "Ma'am," Caleb said gently, "would you like this?" He held out the sandwich and coffee. She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. I can't take your food," she whispered. "It's okay," Caleb said. "I haven't touched it. Still fresh." The toddler on her lap stopped crying for a moment, his eyes locking onto the sandwich. His tiny hand reached out, fingers grasping at air. The woman's face crumpled. "I can't." "Please," Caleb interrupted, his voice soft. "I insist." For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the sandwich with trembling fingers. The coffee, too. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. My name is Talia. I'm Caleb." He smiled, even though his stomach was eating itself. "Take care of yourself, all right?" He didn't wait for more, didn't ask questions or expect gratitude. He just turned and walked back to his truck, climbed in, and drove toward the construction site with an empty stomach and something strange in his chest that felt a little like peace. What Caleb didn't know, couldn't have known, was that someone had been watching. A black sedan parked 3 spaces down. A driver with instructions to follow Talia Harper, the estranged daughter of one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast, and report back on her condition. The driver had seen everything, and he would tell Richard Harper exactly what kind of man had helped his daughter when she had nothing. Have you ever made a choice that felt small in the moment but turned out to be bigger than you could have imagined? Maybe you held the door for someone, or listened when someone needed to talk, or shared something you couldn't really afford to share. Drop a comment and tell me about it. Those moments matter more than we know. The construction site sat on the edge of town, a half-built medical complex that had been delayed twice due to funding issues. Caleb pulled up at 6:40, 10 minutes before his shift started, and sat in the truck for a moment. His head felt light. Hunger had settled into a dull ache that radiated from his stomach to his temples. He grabbed his water bottle filled from the tap at home and headed toward the trailer where the crew clocked in. "Yo, Rivers," a voice called from near the equipment. It was Danny, one of the younger guys on the crew, always loud and always moving. "You good, man? You look like death." "I'm fine," Caleb said, forcing a grin. "Just tired." "You're always tired." Danny laughed, but there was concern in his eyes. "You eat today?" "Yeah." Another lie. They were stacking up. The foreman, a thick-necked man named Bill, emerged from the trailer with a clipboard. "All right, listen up. We've got concrete coming in at 8. I need the foundation forms checked before then. Rivers, you're on rebar with Martinez. Danny, you're running the mixer. Let's move." The crew dispersed. Caleb grabbed his gloves and hard hat and followed Martinez, a quiet guy in his 50s, who'd been doing this longer than Caleb had been alive, toward the eastern side of the site. "You okay?" Martinez asked as they walked. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Martinez shrugged. "You look pale, and you're walking like your boots are full of rocks." Caleb forced a laugh. "I'm good. Let's just get this done." They worked in silence, securing rebar into the forms, checking measurements, making sure everything was level. It was repetitive, physical work that usually cleared Caleb's mind. But today, the hunger gnawed at him. His hands shook when he lifted the heavier pieces. Twice, he had to stop and catch his breath. By 10:30, the sun was high, and the temperature had climbed into the low 60s. Caleb's shirt was soaked with sweat. He reached for his water bottle and drained what was left. "You sure you're okay?" Martinez asked again. The world tilted. Caleb stumbled, his boot catching on a piece of rebar. He went down hard, catching himself on his palms, gravel biting into his skin. "Whoa!" Martinez dropped his tools and knelt beside him. "Rivers, you all right?" "I'm fine. Just tripped." "You didn't trip. You almost passed out." Martinez grabbed his shoulder. "When's the last time you ate?" Caleb didn't answer. "That's what I thought." Martinez stood and waved toward the trailer. "Bill, we need a break over here." "I'm fine," Caleb insisted, pushing himself up. His vision swam. "I don't need. Sit down before you fall down," Martinez said firmly. "Pride's gonna get you killed on a site like this." Bill jogged over, his expression shifting from annoyed to concerned when he saw Caleb's face. "What happened?" "He's been running on empty," Martinez said. "Needs food and water." Bill sighed. "Rivers, go take 20 in the trailer. There's sandwiches in the cooler. Help yourself. I can work." "That wasn't a suggestion." Bill's voice was kind but firm. "You're no good to me if you're passing out. Go." Caleb nodded, shame burning in his chest, and walked toward the trailer. Inside, the cooler sat in the corner. He opened it and found 3 sandwiches wrapped in plastic, a couple of apples, and some granola bars. His stomach roared at the sight. He grabbed one sandwich, unwrapped it, and took a bite. Turkey and cheese. It tasted like heaven. He ate slowly, forcing himself not to inhale it all at once. The food hit his system like a jolt, energy trickling back into his limbs. By the time he finished, his hands had stopped shaking. He sat there for a while, staring at the plywood walls of the trailer, hating how weak he felt, hating that he couldn't even feed himself properly, hating that he'd given away his breakfast when he could barely afford it. But even in the midst of that shame, he couldn't regret it. The look on Talia's face when he handed her that sandwich, relief, gratitude, disbelief that someone had noticed her, that look was worth skipping a meal. He just wished it didn't have to be a choice. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Caleb kept his head down, worked hard, and avoided eye contact with anyone who might ask if he was okay. By 3 o'clock, when Bill finally called it, Caleb's body was screaming for rest. He clocked out, climbed into his truck, and drove toward Isla's school. Pickup was at 3:30, which gave him just enough time to stop at the discount grocery store on the way. Inside, he grabbed a cart and moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency. Generic pasta, store-brand sauce, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, a gallon of milk. He checked prices obsessively, doing math in his head, making sure he stayed under $23, the amount left on his debit card, until Friday's paycheck. At the register, the total came to $22.67. He swiped his card and held his breath until the machine beeped. Approval. Outside, he loaded the bags into the truck and sat for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. 3 more days until payday. 3 more days until he could breathe a little easier. 3 more days until rent was due and the stress started all over again. He thought about the sandwich again, about Talia, about the kid in her lap who'd stopped crying when he saw the food. At least someone got a good meal today, Caleb thought. He started the truck and drove to the school. Isla was waiting near the entrance, talking to another little girl. When she saw Caleb's truck, her face lit up. She said goodbye to her friend and ran over, climbing into the passenger seat. "Hi, Daddy." "Hey, baby girl. How was your day?" "Good. We did art. I made you something." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack and handed it to him. Caleb unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, one tall, one small. The words, "Me and Daddy," were written across the top in wobbly letters. Something in his chest cracked open. "It's perfect," he said, his voice thick. "I love it. Can we hang it on the fridge?" "Absolutely." They drove home through traffic that crawled and sputtered. Isla talked about her day, recess, lunch, the field trip she still hoped she could go on. Caleb listened, nodded, promised he'd figure it out. At home, he made spaghetti while Isla did her homework at the table. The apartment was small and shabby, but it was theirs. He'd hung her drawings on the fridge, kept her toys organized in bins, made sure she had a space that felt safe. After dinner, they watched a kids' show on the old TV Caleb had gotten from a thrift store. Isla curled up next to him on the couch, her head resting on his arm. He stroked her hair absently, feeling the weight of the day settle into his bones. At 8, he carried her to bed. She was already half asleep, eyes fluttering. "Daddy," she murmured as he tucked her in. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are we poor?" The question hit him like a punch. He sat on the edge of her bed, searching for the right words. "Why do you ask that?" "Because some kids at school have big houses and new stuff, and we don't." Caleb's throat tightened. "We have what we need, Isla. We have each other. That's what matters most. But you're always tired, and you don't eat sometimes. So she'd noticed. Of course she had. Kids noticed everything. I'm okay, he said softly. I promise. Things are a little tight right now, but we're going to be fine. Okay. She closed her eyes, trusting him completely. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. More than anything. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked open the way she liked. Then he walked back to the living room and sank onto the couch, exhausted beyond measure. On the coffee table sat the bills. He picked up the rent notice and stared at the number. $340. He had 3 days. He could ask his mom, but she was on a fixed income and already helped when she could. He could ask his brother, but they weren't close anymore. He could. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Rivers, this is attorney Patricia Mills. I represent a client who would like to speak with you regarding an incident that occurred 3 weeks ago. Please call at your earliest convenience. A phone number followed. Caleb frowned. An attorney? About 3 weeks ago? He racked his brain trying to think of what could have happened. Had someone at the site gotten hurt and blamed him? Had Victoria decided to go after him legally? His stomach churned. This was the last thing he needed. He stared at the number for a long time. Then he set the phone down and decided to deal with it tomorrow. Tonight, he was too tired to face one more problem. He lay back on the couch, closed his eyes, and let exhaustion drag him under. Time moved the way it always did for people like Caleb, fast and slow at once. Days blurred together in a rhythm of wake up, work, survive. The paycheck came. Rent got paid with $12 to spare. A pipe under the sink started leaking. The truck's check engine light came on. Isla needed a winter coat. Caleb didn't call the attorney back. He figured it was a scam or a mistake. Either way, he didn't have the bandwidth to deal with it. He kept working, kept pushing through the exhaustion, kept making sure Isla had everything she needed, even when he had nothing left. Some mornings, he drove past the cafe where he'd bought that sandwich. Once, he saw a woman with a child at the bus stop and felt a pang of something hope, maybe, that Talia had found her way to somewhere better. He never expected to see her again. He certainly never expected her to remember him. But 3 weeks after that rainy morning, on a Saturday afternoon when Caleb was wearing old sweatpants and trying to fix the kitchen sink with a wrench held together by rust and willpower, there was a knock at the door. Isla looked up from her coloring. Someone's here, Daddy. I know, baby. Stay there. Caleb wiped his hands on a towel and walked to the door. When he opened it, 2 people in expensive suits stood on his doorstep, looking completely out of place. And that's where everything changed. That's where his life split into before and after. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Caleb stood in his doorway, staring at these 2 lawyers, who looked like they'd stepped out of a different world entirely, a world where clothes didn't come from clearance racks and shoes weren't held together with superglue. I'm sorry, Caleb said, his voice shaky. Who did you say you represent? Miss Talia Harper, the woman repeated. She was tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through him. May we come in for a moment? Caleb glanced back at Isla, who was watching with wide, curious eyes. Yeah, sure, it's not much. But we're not here to judge your home, Mr. Rivers, the male lawyer said, his tone surprisingly gentle. We're here to deliver something important. They stepped inside, and Caleb closed the door behind them. His hands were still shaking as he looked down at the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive. His name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. What is this? He asked. Perhaps you should sit down, the woman suggested. Caleb didn't sit. He couldn't. His legs felt like they might give out. But sitting felt like admitting he was afraid, and he'd been afraid for so long he'd learned to stand through it. He tore open the envelope. Inside were documents, legal papers with words like deed and transfer of ownership and trust fund printed in official-looking fonts. There were numbers that didn't make sense, commas in places that seemed impossible, and beneath all of that, folded carefully, was a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery that smelled faintly of lavender. Caleb's eyes scanned the first few lines of the letter, and his vision blurred. Dear Caleb, you don't know me. Not really, but you saved my life. His knees did give out then. He stumbled backward and caught himself against the arm of the couch, nearly sitting on Isla's crayons. "Daddy?" Isla's voice was small, worried. "I'm okay, baby," he managed, but his voice cracked on the words. The male lawyer stepped forward, his expression kind. "Mr. Rivers, 3 weeks ago, you gave your breakfast to a woman at a bus stop. Do you remember?" Caleb's mind raced backward. The rain, the woman with the crying child, the sandwich he couldn't afford to give away but did anyway. Yeah, I remember. Talia," she said. Her name was Talia. "That's correct," the woman lawyer said. "Talia Harper. She asked us to find you and deliver this personally because what you did for her that morning changed everything." Caleb looked down at the papers in his hands. His eyes caught on specific phrases. "Full ownership of property located at 2847 Maple Street. Educational Trust Fund in the amount of..." The number had so many zeros he had to count them twice. "This has to be a mistake," he whispered. "This can't be real." "It's very real," the male lawyer assured him. "Miss Harper was quite insistent. She wanted to thank you for your kindness, in the only way she felt was adequate. But I just gave her a sandwich. I mean, it was nothing. It was $5. To you, it was $5, the woman said. To her, it was everything." Caleb's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter completely. He started reading aloud, his voice barely above a whisper, because if he didn't read it out loud, he wouldn't believe it was real. "Dear Caleb, you don't know me. Not really, but you saved my life. That morning at the bus stop, I was at the lowest point I've ever been. I had $13 to my name, a 2-year-old son who hadn't eaten since the night before, and nowhere to go. I'd been sleeping in shelters when we could get in, and on benches when we couldn't. I know what you're thinking. How does someone end up that way? Let me tell you. My name is Talia Harper, and I was born into wealth. My father, Richard Harper, owns Harper Development Corporation. You might have seen the buildings, they're all over the East Coast. Growing up, I had everything money could buy. Private schools, vacations in Europe, a trust fund that would have set me up for life. But money doesn't buy happiness, and it certainly doesn't buy freedom. When I was 23, I fell in love with a man my father didn't approve of. He wasn't rich. He didn't come from the right family. My father gave me an ultimatum: leave him or lose everything. I chose love. I thought we'd build something beautiful together, and for a while, we did. We got married. I got pregnant. My son, Joshua, was born, and I thought I had everything I needed. But my husband wasn't ready for fatherhood. He wasn't ready for struggle. When the money ran out and reality set in, he left. Just walked away one morning and never came back. I was too proud to go back to my father, too ashamed to admit I'd made a mistake. So I tried to make it work. I got a job, then lost it. Got an apartment, then got evicted. Slowly, everything crumbled. That morning you found me. I'd been sitting at that bus stop for 3 hours. Joshua had been crying for so long he'd exhausted himself. I'd been staring at the phone number for child services, wondering if my baby would be better off without me. I was ready to give up. And then you appeared. You didn't look at me with pity or disgust. You didn't ask questions or make me explain why I was in that position. You just saw a mother and a hungry child, and you gave us your food. You gave us your breakfast, Caleb, the one you'd probably been looking forward to all morning, and you walked away like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing to me. It reminded me that kindness still exists, that people still see each other, that maybe, just maybe, I was worth saving. I called my father that afternoon. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. I apologized. I cried, and he cried too. He'd been looking for me, he said. He'd hired investigators. He'd never stopped hoping I'd come home. He welcomed me back with open arms. No judgment. No, I told you so. Just love. I'm back with my family now. Joshua has a home, food, and a grandfather who adores him. I have my life back, not the old one, but something better, something built on humility and gratitude, and I owe it all to you. I know you probably didn't think twice about that sandwich, but I've thought about it every day since, about how one small act of kindness from a stranger saved my life. I had my father's lawyers track you down. I hope that's not too invasive, but I needed to thank you properly. Enclosed in this envelope, you'll find the deed to a house. It's in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. It's yours, free and clear, no mortgage, no strings. You'll also find paperwork for a trust fund set up in your daughter's name. It'll cover her education, college, graduate school, whatever she wants. She'll never have to worry about student loans or choosing between her dreams and financial reality. I know what you're thinking. This is too much. You don't deserve it. You were just being kind. But that's exactly why you deserve it. You gave when you had nothing to give. You saw me when I was invisible. You treated me with dignity when I felt worthless. Please accept this gift. Not as payment, kindness can't be bought, but as gratitude from someone whose life you changed. I'd love to meet you in person, if you're willing. My lawyers have my contact information, but even if you choose not to, please know this. You saved me, Caleb Rivers, and I will spend the rest of my life paying that forward. With eternal gratitude, Talia Harper. By the time Caleb finished reading, tears were streaming down his face. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The letter fell from his hands and fluttered to the floor. Isla had gotten up from the table and was standing next to him now, her small hand on his arm. "Daddy, why are you crying?" He pulled her into his lap, holding her tight, and tried to find words that made sense. Because something really good just happened, baby girl." The woman lawyer picked up the letter and set it gently on the coffee table. "There's a house waiting for you, Mr. Rivers. Whenever you're ready to see it, we'll take you there. And if you'd like to speak with Miss Harper, she's very eager to meet you." "I don't understand," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "I gave her a $5 sandwich. That's it. I didn't save anyone. You gave her hope," the male lawyer interrupted. "In a world that had beaten her down, you reminded her that humanity still exists. That's worth more than any dollar amount." Caleb looked at Isla, then at the papers spread across his lap, then at these two strangers who just walked into his life and turned it upside down. "Is this real?" he whispered. "This is really happening?" "It's really happening," the woman confirmed. "And Miss Harper would very much like to meet you, if you're open to it." Caleb nodded, unable to form words. The lawyers stood. The man handed Caleb a business card. "Our contact information is here. When you're ready, call us. We'll arrange everything." "And Mr. Rivers?" the woman added, pausing at the door. "What you did that morning, most people would have walked past. But you didn't. You stopped. You cared. Don't ever think that's a small thing." They left, closing the door quietly behind them. Caleb sat on his worn-out couch in his shabby apartment where the sink leaked and the heat barely worked, holding his daughter and staring at documents that promised a completely different life. "Daddy?" Isla whispered. "What does it all mean?" "It means," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion, "it means things are going to be okay, baby. Better than okay." She hugged him tight, and he let himself cry, really cry, for the first time in years. Not from pain or exhaustion or fear, but from relief so profound it felt like someone had lifted a 1,000-pound weight off his chest. That night, after he'd put Isla to bed and she'd finally stopped asking questions he didn't know how to answer, Caleb sat alone in the kitchen with the letter spread out in front of him. He read it again, then again, looking for the catch, the fine print, the part where it all fell apart. But there was nothing. Just kindness meeting kindness. Just one broken person reaching back to help another. He thought about calling someone his mom, his brother, someone who could tell him this was real and not some exhaustion-induced hallucination. But it was late, and part of him wanted to hold this moment privately for just a little longer. He pulled out his phone and stared at the lawyer's business card. Then he opened his browser and typed, "Richard Harper, developer." Articles flooded the screen, Forbes profiles, news stories about multi-million-dollar deals, photos of a gray-haired man in expensive suits cutting ribbons at building openings, and then, more recently, a headline, "Billionaire developer reunites with long-lost daughter." The article had a photo, Richard Harper standing next to a younger woman with kind eyes and a cautious smile. Next to her, a toddler who looked healthy and happy. Talia. It was real. All of it was real. Caleb set the phone down and pressed his palms against his eyes. "How did you process something like this? How did you wrap your mind around the fact that giving away a sandwich, something you'd done without thinking, without expecting anything, had somehow changed the entire trajectory of your life? He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, his brain spun with possibilities and fears and questions. What if he wasn't worthy of this gift? What if he screwed it up somehow? What if accepting it made him a fraud or a charity case or... No. He stopped that thought before it could take root. Talia had been very clear in her letter. This wasn't charity. This was gratitude. And if their positions had been reversed, if Caleb had found himself back on his feet and wanted to thank someone who'd helped him when he had nothing, wouldn't he do the same? By the time the sun rose, Caleb had made a decision. He was going to call the lawyers. He was going to meet Talia. He was going to accept this gift, not because he thought he deserved it, but because refusing it would dishonor what his small act of kindness had meant to her. And maybe, just maybe, he was going to let himself believe that good things could happen to good people, even people like him. At breakfast, Isla looked at him across the table. "Daddy, are we still poor?" Caleb smiled, really smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. "No, baby girl, I don't think we are." 3 days later, Caleb called the number on the business card. A secretary answered, and within minutes, he was speaking to attorney Patricia Mills. "Mr. Rivers," she said warmly, "we've been hoping you'd call." "I'm sorry it took me a few days," Caleb said. "I needed time to process everything." "Of course, this is a lot to take in." "I'd like to meet her," Caleb said. "Talia, if she still wants to meet me." "She absolutely does. How does this weekend work for you? Saturday afternoon?" Caleb's heart pounded. "Yeah, Saturday works." "Wonderful. We'll send a car for you. Say, 2 o'clock? A car? I can drive." "Miss Harper insisted," Patricia said gently. "She wants to make sure everything is taken care of." Caleb swallowed hard. "Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rivers. What you did for her, it matters more than you know." The week crawled by. Caleb went to work, but his mind was elsewhere. His co-workers noticed the change in him, something lighter in his posture, something less defeated in his eyes, but he didn't tell them why. Not yet. It still felt too fragile, too surreal. He told Isla they were going to meet someone special on Saturday. She asked a million questions, and he answered as best he could, without overwhelming her 6-year-old brain. Friday night, he pulled his one decent shirt from the closet, a button-down he'd worn to his cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It still fit, barely. He ironed it carefully, trying not to think about the fact that he was about to meet a billionaire's daughter. Saturday morning, he woke up with his stomach in knots. He made breakfast for Isla, helped her pick out a dress, and tried to calm his racing thoughts. At exactly 2 o'clock, a black car pulled up outside his apartment. The driver, a professional-looking man in his 50s, knocked politely. "Mr. Rivers, I'm here to take you to the Harper estate." Estate. The word made Caleb's mouth go dry. He buckled Isla into the back seat, then climbed in beside her. The car was nicer than any vehicle he'd ever been in. Leather seats, perfectly clean, the kind of car that probably cost more than he made in 2 years. The drive took 40 minutes, moving from the working-class neighborhoods Caleb knew into areas where the houses got bigger and the lawns got greener. Eventually, they turned onto a private road lined with trees. At the end of the road sat a house, no, not a house, a mansion, white columns, sprawling gardens, a fountain in the circular driveway. "Oh wow," Isla breathed, pressing her face to the window. Caleb couldn't find words. The car stopped at the front entrance. The driver opened the door, and Caleb stepped out on shaky legs. He took Isla's hand, and together they walked toward the massive front door. Before they could knock, the door opened, and there she was, Talia. She looked different than she had at the bus stop. Clean clothes, styled hair, but her eyes, those were the same, kind and tired and grateful. "Caleb," she said, her voice breaking on his name. "You came." "Of course," he managed. She stepped forward and, without hesitation, wrapped him in a hug. Caleb stood there, frozen for a moment, then slowly hugged her back. When she pulled away, there were tears on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." I just gave you a sandwich, Caleb said, his own voice thick. You gave me hope, Talia corrected. Come in, please. There's someone I want you to meet. She led them inside, through a foyer that looked like something from a magazine, down a hallway lined with artwork, and into a sunlit living room where a man sat in an armchair, Richard Harper. He stood when they entered, a tall man with grey hair and sharp eyes that softened when they landed on Caleb. Mr. Rivers, he said, extending his hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Caleb shook his hand, feeling completely out of place. Sir, please call me Richard. He looked down at Isla. And who is this beautiful young lady? This is my daughter, Isla, Caleb said. Hello, Isla. Richard crouched down to her level. I have a grandson about your age. Would you like to meet him? Isla looked up at Caleb, who nodded. Go ahead, baby. A woman, Talia's assistant, maybe appeared and gently led Isla toward another room where children's laughter could be heard. Once she was gone, Richard gestured to the couch. Please, sit. We have a lot to talk about. Caleb sat stiffly, his hands clasped between his knees. Talia sat across from him, her expression warm. I want you to know, Richard began, that when Talia told me what you did for her, I couldn't believe it. Not because I doubted her, but because, well, kindness like that is rare. I really didn't do anything special, Caleb said. You gave away your breakfast when you were hungry yourself, Talia interjected. I saw your hands shaking, Caleb. I knew you needed that food, but you gave it to me anyway. Caleb looked down. You needed it more. That's my point, she said softly. You made that choice. Most people wouldn't have. Richard leaned forward. My daughter has told me everything, about where she was, what she was going through, and how close she came to. He trailed off, his voice catching. You saved her life, Mr. Rivers, and for that, my family owes you a debt we can never fully repay. You don't owe me anything, Caleb insisted. I'm just glad she's okay. Nevertheless, Richard said, we want to do this. The house, the trust fund for your daughter, it's our way of saying thank you. Caleb's throat tightened. It's too much. It's not nearly enough, Talia said. But it's a start. They talked for over an hour. Talia told him more about her story, the struggles, the shame, the moment she decided to reach out to her father. Richard spoke about the 2 years he'd spent searching for her, the relief when she finally called, the joy of having his daughter and grandson back. And slowly, Caleb began to understand. This wasn't about the sandwich, not really. It was about what the sandwich represented. It was about dignity and humanity and the small choices that ripple out in ways we can never predict. When Isla came back into the room, she was holding hands with a little boy, Joshua, Talia's son, and laughing about something only kids found funny. Talia watched them with tears in her eyes. He's happy, she whispered. For the first time in so long, he's happy. So is she, Caleb said, watching his daughter. Before they left, Talia walked them to the car. She handed Caleb another envelope, this one thinner. What's this? He asked. The keys to your new house, she said. And the address. It's ready whenever you are. Caleb stared at the envelope, overwhelmed all over again. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Talia assured him. Just promise me one thing. What? Promise me you'll pay it forward, she said. When you see someone who needs help, don't walk past. That's all I ask. Caleb nodded, his vision blurring. I promise. Talia hugged him again, then knelt down and hugged Isla. You take care of your dad, okay? He's a very special man. I know, Isla said simply. On the drive home, Isla fell asleep against Caleb's shoulder. He held the envelope with the house keys, running his thumb over the paper, trying to absorb the fact that his life had just changed forever. That night, after putting Isla to bed, Caleb sat alone in the kitchen one more time. He opened the envelope and pulled out the keys. They were attached to a keychain with the address engraved on it, 2847 Maple Street. He typed the address into his phone. The house that appeared on the screen was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a good neighborhood with good schools, a home. Caleb set the phone down and pressed his hands to his face. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Not to ask for anything for once. He didn't need to ask. but to say thank you to whatever force in the universe had put him at that bus stop on that rainy morning, to whatever had made him stop instead of walking past. Thank you for letting me be the kind of person who stops. Thank you for letting me be kind when I had nothing. Thank you for this second chance, and please, help me be worthy of it. When he finally went to bed, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Caleb slept peacefully. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, they'd start their new life. But tonight, in this moment, Caleb Rivers was simply grateful. Moving day came 2 weeks later, and Caleb still couldn't quite believe it was real. He'd driven past the house on Maple Street 3 times before he finally got the courage to use the keys. Each time, he'd sat in his truck across the street, staring at the white exterior, the manicured lawn, the porch with its swing, and thought, this can't be mine. But it was. The movers, paid for by Talia, despite Caleb's protests, arrived at his old apartment at 8 in the morning. They were professional, efficient, and didn't comment on how little he actually owned. 2 beds, a couch held together by hope, a kitchen table with a wobbly leg, boxes of clothes, and Isla's toys. Everything he and his daughter had in the world fit into one small truck. Isla bounced around the empty apartment, excited in the way only children can be when everything is an adventure. "We're really moving, Daddy? To the big house? We're really moving, baby girl." She squealed and ran to hug him. Caleb lifted her up, spinning her around once before setting her down. His back still ached from years of construction work, but today the pain felt distant, almost irrelevant. At the new house, the movers unloaded everything in under an hour. Caleb stood in the living room afterward, looking at his shabby furniture in this beautiful space, and felt a strange mix of gratitude and displacement. His old couch looked ridiculous against the fresh paint and hardwood floors, but Talia had insisted he bring everything. "Make it yours," she'd said. "Fill it with your life." Isla claimed the bedroom with the window seat immediately. She stood in the middle of the empty room, arms spread wide, spinning in circles. "It's so big, Daddy. Can I paint it purple?" "We'll see," Caleb said, smiling. "Maybe we can pick out paint together this weekend. And get new furniture?" "Yeah, new furniture too." She hugged him again, and Caleb felt something in his chest crack open, not painfully, but like a door he'd kept locked for years, finally swinging wide. That first night in the new house, Caleb couldn't sleep. He walked through the rooms in the dark, running his hands along walls that belonged to him, standing in a kitchen twice the size of his old apartment, looking out at a backyard where Isla could play safely. The silence was different here, peaceful instead of oppressive. He thought about calling someone to share this moment, his mother, his brother, someone who knew where he'd been and could appreciate where he was now. But it was late, and part of him still felt like if he talked about it too much, it might disappear. In the morning, Isla woke him up by jumping on his bed. "Daddy, can we go explore the neighborhood?" They spent the day walking around, meeting neighbors who welcomed them with smiles and waves. An elderly couple brought over cookies. A woman with 2 kids Isla's age invited them to a barbecue the following weekend. Everyone was kind in that casual, effortless way that people are when life hasn't beaten them down yet. Or maybe they'd been beaten down too, Caleb thought. Maybe everyone carried weight. Maybe the difference was just having enough space to breathe under it. On Monday, Caleb went back to work at the construction site. He could have quit. The lawyer handling Isla's trust fund had explained that there was more than enough money for them to live comfortably. But Caleb needed to work, needed the routine, the purpose, the reminder that he was still the same person, even if his circumstances had changed. His co-workers noticed something different about him. Martinez pulled him aside during lunch break. "You look lighter," he said, studying Caleb's face. "Something happened?" Caleb hesitated. He hadn't told anyone at work about the house or Talia or any of it. Part of him worried they wouldn't believe him. Another part worried they would, and it would change how they saw him. "Just got some good news," he said finally. "About housing." Martinez nodded slowly. "Good news is rare. Hold on to it." "I will." That afternoon, as Caleb was hauling materials across the site, his phone rang. Talia's name appeared on the screen. "Hello?" "Caleb, hi. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Just on my lunch break." A small lie, but he didn't want her to think he was slacking off. "I wanted to check in, see how you're settling into the house." "It's perfect," Caleb said honestly. "Isla loves it. I don't know how to thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me," Talia said. "But actually, I'm calling because I wanted to run something by you. My father and I are starting a foundation. We're calling it the Breakfast Initiative." Caleb smiled despite himself. "Named after a sandwich?" "Named after what that sandwich represented," Talia corrected gently. "We want to help struggling families, single parents, mostly. Provide meals, housing assistance, job placement, all the things I needed when I had nowhere to turn." "That sounds amazing. We'd love for you to be involved," Talia said. "Not just as a donor or a name on paperwork. We want you to help us shape it. You understand what it's like to struggle in ways that my father and I are still learning. Your perspective would be invaluable." Caleb leaned against a stack of lumber, processing. "I don't know anything about running a foundation. Neither did I 6 months ago," Talia said. "But I know what it's like to be invisible. And you know what it's like to see people anyway. That's what we need. Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take your time. But Caleb, I really hope you'll say yes." After they hung up, Caleb stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. A few months ago, he'd been counting change to buy breakfast. Now someone was asking him to help run a foundation. The whiplash of it all made his head spin, but underneath the disbelief was something else, something that felt like purpose. He thought about all the mornings he'd gone hungry, all the nights he'd lain awake wondering how he'd make rent, all the times he'd seen other people struggling and wished he could help, but had nothing to give. What if he could actually do something about that now? What if this gift wasn't just about him and Isla, but about everyone who came after? That night, after tucking Isla into bed in her new purple bedroom, they'd painted it that weekend. Both of them covered in splatters by the end. Caleb sat down and wrote Talia an email. "I'm in. Tell me what you need me to do." The foundation launched 3 months later with an event at a downtown hotel. Caleb stood on a small stage in a suit that actually fit. Talia had insisted on taking him shopping and told his story to a room full of donors and journalists. He talked about being a single father, about choosing between feeding himself and feeding his daughter, about the morning he gave his breakfast to a stranger because her need was greater than his own, about how that small choice had somehow led to this moment. His voice cracked twice. He hadn't wanted to cry in front of all these people, but the emotion was too big to contain. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Talia stood next to him, her own eyes wet, and squeezed his hand. "You did great," she whispered. The foundation started small. They partnered with local shelters to provide meals. They set up a fund to help families at risk of eviction. They created a job placement program specifically for single parents who needed flexible hours. Caleb visited the shelters regularly, talking to families, hearing their stories. He saw himself in every exhausted face, every parent trying desperately to hold things together for their kids. One afternoon, he met a woman named Gloria who reminded him painfully of where he'd been. She had 2 kids under 5, worked 2 jobs, and was still falling behind on rent. Her eyes had that hollow look. Caleb recognized the look of someone who'd stopped believing things could get better. "I can help," Caleb told her. "The foundation can help." Gloria looked at him with suspicion. "What's the catch?" "No catch. We help with rent, food, job placement, whatever you need to get stable." "Why?" "Because someone helped me once," Caleb said simply, "and now I'm helping you." They enrolled Gloria in the program. Within 2 months, she had a better job with benefits and childcare assistance. Within 6 months, she'd saved enough for a security deposit on a decent apartment. The day she moved in, she called Caleb, crying. "I didn't think this was possible. I thought we'd be stuck forever." "I know the feeling," Caleb said, "but you're not stuck. You never were. You just needed someone to see you." Stories like Gloria's multiplied. The foundation grew. Media outlets picked up the story, the single dad who gave away his breakfast and ended up changing hundreds of lives. People donated. Volunteers signed up. The ripple effect Talia had talked about was becoming a wave. But not everyone was happy about Caleb's transformation. 6 months after the foundation launched, Victoria showed up at his door. His ex-wife looked the same but different, older around the eyes, harder in the set of her jaw. "Can I come in?" she asked. Caleb hesitated, then stepped aside. "Isla's at a friend's house. What do you want, Victoria?" She walked into the living room, taking in the new furniture, the art on the walls, the obvious signs of stability. "Nice place. Thanks. I saw you on the news," she said, turning to face him. "The foundation, the big house, the trust fund for Isla. Okay, I think I deserve half." Caleb stared at her. "What? We were married. What's yours should be mine too. We've been divorced for 2 years, Victoria, and this isn't money I earned. It's a gift someone gave me out of gratitude. A gift worth millions," she shot back. "And I'm Isla's mother. I should benefit too." Caleb felt anger rise in his chest, hot and righteous. "You left us. You walked away because I couldn't give you the life you wanted. And now that someone else has given us a chance at something better, you want in?" "I made a mistake," Victoria said, and for the first time, her voice cracked. I thought I needed more, but I was wrong. I miss what we had. I miss Isla. I miss you." The anger drained out of Caleb as quickly as it had come. He looked at this woman he'd once loved, this person who'd shared his life and his dreams, and felt only sadness. "Victoria," he said quietly, "I can't give you half of something that was never meant to be divided. But I'm not going to keep Isla from you. You're her mother. If you want more time with her, we can arrange that." "I don't want just time," Victoria said. "I want us back. The family we were." "We can't go back," Caleb said. "Too much has changed. I've changed." "Because of money?" "Because of grace," Caleb corrected. "Someone showed me grace when I had nothing, and it changed how I see everything, including this." He walked to a drawer and pulled out a checkbook, something he'd never owned before. He wrote a check for $10,000 and handed it to Victoria. "What is this?" she asked. "Help," Caleb said. "Not because you deserve it or because I owe you anything, but because you're struggling, and I can help, so I will." Victoria stared at the check, tears forming in her eyes. "Why would you do this after everything I did?" "Because holding on to anger doesn't change anything," Caleb said. "And because Isla loves you, she deserves to have both her parents in her life, stable and present." Victoria left with the check, but not before hugging Caleb tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." "I know," Caleb said. "Me too." After she left, Caleb sat alone for a while, processing. A year ago, he would have told Victoria to get lost, would have let bitterness poison any chance of civility. But Talia's gift had taught him something important. Grace wasn't just something you received. It was something you extended, even to people who'd hurt you, especially to people who'd hurt you. The Foundation's 1-year anniversary gala was held at the same hotel where they'd launched. This time, the room was packed. Donors, families they'd helped, media, community leaders. Talia had invited Caleb to speak again, and this time he felt more prepared. He stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and began. "A year ago, I told you about giving away my breakfast. Tonight, I want to tell you what I've learned since then." The room quieted. "I learned that kindness isn't a transaction. When I handed that sandwich to Talia, I didn't do it expecting anything in return. I did it because it was right. Because her need was greater than mine. Because that's what we do when we remember we're all human." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I learned that receiving grace is harder than giving it. When Talia gave me that house, that trust fund, I felt unworthy. I felt like I didn't deserve it. And maybe I didn't. But that's the thing about grace, it's not about deserving, it's about love." Heads nodded throughout the room. "I learned that transformation isn't just about money. Yes, financial stability changed my life. But what really changed me was remembering that I matter, that my daughter matters, that our struggles don't define our worth." His voice strengthened. "This past year, we've helped over 300 families. We've prevented 62 evictions. We've placed 47 people in stable jobs. We've served thousands of meals. And every single one of those numbers represents a person who needed someone to see them, to believe in them, to extend grace." Applause began, But Caleb raised a hand. I'm not done. Because here's the most important thing I've learned. None of us are self-made. Every success, every triumph, every moment of rising above circumstances, it happens because someone, somewhere, extended a hand. My hand came in the form of Talia Harper and her family. But all of us have received help we didn't earn and grace we didn't deserve. He looked directly at Talia, who sat in the front row with her father and son. So the question isn't whether we deserve the good things that come our way. The question is, what do we do with them? Do we hoard them, hide them, or do we let them flow through us to others who need them just as desperately as we once did? The room was silent now, hanging on every word. This foundation exists because one act of kindness created a ripple. But ripples don't stop. They keep moving outward, touching more lives, creating more ripples. Every person we help goes on to help others. Every family we stabilize becomes stable enough to lift someone else up. That's how change happens. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts, multiplied by thousands of people who choose, every day, to see each other. He gripped the podium. So here's my challenge to everyone in this room. Tomorrow, when you leave here, look for someone who's invisible, someone society has trained us to walk past, and stop. See them. Help them if you can. And if you can't help materially, help with dignity, with respect, with the acknowledgement that they're human and they matter. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the silent room, everyone heard. Because somewhere, right now, there's a father sitting at a bus stop wondering if he can keep going. There's a mother choosing between rent and food. There's a child who's hungry. And one of us, just one, can be the person who reminds them that hope still exists. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Caleb stepped away from the podium, overwhelmed, and Talia met him at the stairs. That was perfect, she said, hugging him. I meant every word. I know you did. Richard Harper approached, extending his hand. Over the past year, he and Caleb had developed a surprising friendship. The billionaire developer and the construction worker had more in common than either expected. Both were fathers, both had known loss, both understood that money couldn't buy the things that mattered most. Proud of you, son, Richard said gruffly. The word son landed softly, but Caleb felt its weight. He'd never had a good relationship with his own father, who'd left when Caleb was young. Richard's presence in his life, in Ayla's life, had filled a gap he hadn't realized was still raw. Thank you, sir, for everything. Stop calling me sir, Richard grumbled. It's Richard. Or, if you're feeling brave, you could call me what Joshua does. What's that, Papa? Richard's eyes crinkled. Ayla's welcome to it too, if she wants. I'd be honored. Caleb's throat tightened. I think she'd love that. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations, but the moment that stuck with Caleb came near the end, when a young man approached him nervously. Mr. Rivers? I'm David. You helped my family 6 months ago. My mom was about to lose our apartment, and the foundation stepped in. Caleb remembered. Single mother, 3 kids, medical debt from her youngest daughter's surgery. How's your family doing? Caleb asked. We're good. Mom got a better job through your placement program. My sister's healthy. We're stable. David paused. But I didn't come to tell you that. I came to tell you what I did. What did you do? Last week, I saw a homeless guy outside the library. Everyone was walking past him, and I thought about what you said in that interview about how you gave your breakfast away, so I bought him lunch. We talked. Turns out he's a veteran who fell through the cracks. I connected him with a shelter and a VA rep. David's eyes were bright. I didn't have much to give, but I gave what I could, because you taught me that's what matters. Caleb's vision blurred. David, that's incredible. It's what you did, David said simply. You started the ripple. I'm just keeping it going. After David walked away, Caleb stood there feeling the full weight of what he'd become part of. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't even just about Talia. It was about every person who'd been helped and then turned around to help someone else. It was about a chain of kindness that stretched back to one sandwich and forward into infinity. Later that night, at home, Ayla was already asleep when Caleb got in. He checked on her, a habit he'd never break, and found her curled up with the stuffed bear Richard had given her for Christmas. On her nightstand was a drawing she'd made at school. It showed stick figures labeled me, Daddy, Mama V, Miss Talia, Joshua, and Papa Richard. A family. Not the one Caleb had imagined when he'd married Victoria all those years ago, but a family nonetheless. Built not on blood or obligation, but on grace and second chances and the choice to keep showing up for each other. Caleb sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, and felt gratitude so profound it hurt. A year and a half after that rainy morning, Caleb took Isla back to the cafe where it all started. She was bigger now, 8 years old, confident in the way kids are when they grow up feeling safe. She knew the story, of course. Caleb had told it to her dozens of times. "Is this it, Daddy?" she asked as they walked toward the entrance. "This is it." Inside, the owner recognized Caleb from the news coverage. "Mr. Rivers, what an honor." "Please, just Caleb." He ordered 2 breakfast sandwiches and coffee for himself, orange juice for Isla. When the owner tried to comp the meal, Caleb insisted on paying and left a tip that made the man's eyes widen. They ate at a corner table and afterward walked to the bus stop across the street. It looked the same. Worn bench, faded route sign, the same spot where Talia had sat with Joshua on that desperate morning. "This is where it happened?" Isla asked. "This is where it happened." She looked at the bench, then up at her father. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped?" "Every day." "Why did you stop?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "Because she needed help, and I could help. It wasn't complicated. But you were hungry too." "I was, but I'd be hungry again tomorrow no matter what. She might not survive the day if nobody helped." Isla processed this, her young face serious. Then she looked past Caleb, and her expression changed. "Daddy, look." Caleb turned. A man sat on the bench now, holding a cardboard sign. "Anything helps. God bless." Isla reached into her backpack and pulled out her lunchbox. "Can I give him my lunch?" Caleb's heart swelled. "You sure, baby girl? You'll be hungry later." "We can get more," Isla said simply. "He might not." "Okay." They walked over together. The man looked up, resignation and hope mixed in his weathered face. "Excuse me, sir," Isla said politely. "Would you like my lunch? It has a sandwich and chips and an apple." The man stared at the lunchbox like it was made of gold. "You sure, sweetheart?" "I'm sure." He took it with shaking hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You're welcome," Isla said. Then, because she was her father's daughter, she added, "Things will get better, I promise." As they walked back to the car, Caleb held Isla's hand and felt the circle complete itself. The kindness he'd shown had come back to him 1,000-fold, and now it was flowing through his daughter to someone else who needed it. This was how the world changed. Not through grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but through small moments repeated over and over, through people choosing to see each other, through grace extended and received and passed forward. That night, Caleb got a text from Talia. Saw the video. Someone filmed Isla giving away her lunch. "It's going viral. Your daughter is amazing." Caleb smiled and typed back, "She learned from the best." "She learned from you," Talia replied. "You started all of this, Caleb. Don't ever forget that." But Caleb knew the truth. He hadn't started anything. He'd just chosen not to walk past. And that choice, that one small, simple choice, had changed everything. 3 years after the lawyers knocked on his door, Caleb stood in the Foundation's new community center, a building Richard Harper had donated, and watched families stream in for the Thanksgiving dinner they hosted annually. Hundreds of people, all of whom had been helped by the breakfast initiative at one point or another. Talia stood next to him, Joshua, now a bright, confident 5-year-old, holding her hand. Richard was across the room, talking to volunteers. Victoria was there too, helping in the kitchen. She and Caleb would never get back together, but they'd found a way to co-parent peacefully, and she'd started volunteering with the Foundation regularly. Isla ran past with a group of kids, laughing about something only 8-year-olds found hilarious. "Look at this," Talia said softly. "Look at what one sandwich created." "It wasn't the sandwich," Caleb said. "It was the choice to see someone." "That's what I mean." Talia looked at him. "You saw me, and now hundreds of people are being seen because of it. Caleb watched the Room families eating together, volunteers serving with smiles, children playing without the weight of food insecurity on their small shoulders. And he thought about that morning 3 years ago when he'd stood in his shabby apartment with $5 in his pocket and a choice to make. He could have walked past, could have told himself he had problems of his own, could have decided that one person's struggle wasn't his responsibility. But he'd stopped, and in stopping, he'd discovered something essential. We're all connected by threads we can't see. Every act of kindness strengthens those threads. Every moment of grace weaves the fabric tighter. And when we choose over and over, in small ways and big, to see each other's humanity, we don't just change individual lives, we change the world. Caleb pulled out his phone and took a photo of the room, not for social media or publicity, but for himself, to remember this moment, to remember that darkness doesn't get the final word, that struggle doesn't define worth, that sometimes, when you give away what little you have, the universe gives you back more than you could have imagined. Not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because that's how grace works. It flows, it multiplies, it finds the cracks in the world and fills them with light. And it all started with a $5 sandwich. If this story touched your heart, here's what I want you to do. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but for yourself and for the world we're all trying to build together. Tomorrow, when you leave your house, look for someone who's invisible, someone sitting alone, someone struggling, someone who needs to be seen. And stop. See them. Help if you can, with money, with time, with a kind word, with acknowledgement of their humanity. Because we're all one bad day, one wrong turn, one unexpected tragedy away from being the person on that bench. And we're all one act of kindness away from being the person who changes everything. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of human connection. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone showed you grace, or a time you showed grace to someone else. And remember, you don't need millions of dollars to change a life. Sometimes, all it takes is a sandwich and the courage to stop.